Welcome to Freedom's Foundation. I am the Constitution guy, and tonight we're going to talk about what is probably the greatest threat to your freedom that you don't know about yet. It's almost time for a presidential election, and that means it's also time for the people to come out of the woodwork and talk about how the Electoral College just isn't fair. And because of that, we need to choose our president based on a national popular vote. And these folks have been actually really effective in winning people over to their side by using emotional arguments. They'll say, well, if one person wins the most votes but they're not president, well, that's not fair. And besides, we're a democracy, right? Well, all those things sound great in theory, but they're a disaster in reality. Probably the biggest problem with it is that this idea is based on the belief that democracy is a good thing, but it's not. Democracy is a terrible idea, and it has failed every time it's tried throughout history. The founders actually wrote a lot about the fact that democracy is a terrible idea. It cannot protect liberty, and it cannot work. That is why they gave us a republic. The United States is a representative republic. And if we go to electing our president based on national popular vote, that's going to move us from being a republic to being something much closer to being a democracy. And remember, democracy doesn't work. I can't get into detail about why democracy is such a terrible idea here. I think I'm going to have to do a future video on that topic, but let me give you a very quick explanation. A republic protects your rights as an individual. A democracy cannot protect your rights because it's just mob rule. In the past, it's been said that democracy is basically two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. It doesn't really turn out well for the sheep, does it? So you never want to be in the minority when it comes to a democracy. Right now you might be saying, so what? Who cares? I mean, even if this is a huge threat to my freedom, it's never going to happen, so why are you throwing such a fit about it? Well, that's where you're wrong. This is actually really close to happening and just in the next couple of years. There's a group out there called National Popular Vote, and they actually have a really interesting way about going about how to make this happen. What they're trying to do is they're trying to convince states to pass legislation that would change the way that state would apportion its electoral votes. What would happen if they pass this legislation is the state's electoral votes would be granted to whoever wins the national popular vote, regardless of what happens in that state. So let's say here in my home state of Illinois, we pass this legislation. Well, if candidate A gets 0 votes in Illinois, but still wins national popular vote, then candidate A is going to get all of Illinois' electoral votes. And once they get enough states to do that, that they have 270 electoral votes that are granted that way, we do have a national popular vote. And here's the thing. This group already has enough states that have already passed this legislation that they're halfway to their goal. And before you get ahead of me, yes, this would be constitutional if they were able to make this happen. If these folks are successful and they're able to move us to a national popular vote for president, that would fundamentally transform the way this nation operates. And it's going to be a disaster. I'll give you 2 specific reasons why. First of all, only urban centers are going to matter in terms of choosing a president now. So our president is going to run this country like it's one giant urban area. But obviously it's not. So that's going to mean that the needs of places like Montana or Alaska or Wyoming are going to be completely ignored, but we're going to focus completely on places like New York, Chicago, and LA. Why? Because that's where all the people are. And these presidents are going to base what they do on where the people are, because that's where they're going to get their votes. The Electoral College was designed the way it was in part because the founders wanted to make sure that whoever was president not only had the support of a significant percentage of the country, but also a significant portion of the states. He needed to have a big enough area that he was representing that he could represent the entire country. And thus far it's been successful, because you'll notice that the politicians have to go to a variety of places in order to get there, in order to be elected president. But basically what they're trying to do is avoid what happens here in Illinois. In case you haven't noticed, Illinois is pretty rural. We have one urban center, Chicago. But Chicago's big enough that it drives all of our statewide elections. Let's take a look at our 2010 governor race. That's what it looked like. Governor Quinn was able to win the governor's race by only getting 4 counties out of 102 counties in Illinois. He won 4. So we run our entire state of Illinois basically like it's an entire urban area. But it's not. Especially if you go downstate, south of Springfield, it's extremely rural. Southern Illinois is ridiculously rural. But yet, we govern that area of the state as if it's an urban area. And if you haven't noticed, Illinois is a disaster. People aren't exactly flocking to this state to join the party. They're leaving in droves. And what we're going to do if we have a national popular vote is we're going to take the Illinois model and we're going to move it national. And if you think that's a good idea, I got 3 words for you. The Chicago way. Do you really want to see that on a national level? The second reason why a national popular vote just won't work, ever, is recounts. Think Florida 2000. Wasn't that fun? Wasn't that a great thing to go through? Well, imagine this on a national scale. Oh yes, Florida 2000 times 50. I think we'd still be trying to figure out who won that race. But by choosing our presidents on a state-by-state basis, that localizes the issue because there's no need to recount California in 2000 because we know Gore pretty much won California handily. We don't need to recount Texas because we know Bush won Texas. Florida was the only area that was really close. But if you take that and make it a national vote, now how many votes Bush did get in California is important. Now how many votes Gore got in Texas is important. So you're recounting not a few million votes, you're recounting 50 to 60 million votes, and you're doing this with every single one of them. It would be a disaster, and it's completely unworkable. Those are only 2 reasons why the Electoral College is a great idea, and the national popular vote cannot work. But there are a lot more reasons why the Electoral College is a good idea. If you want to see more of them, check out a website that I found, taraross.com. She's a lawyer from Texas and she's done some great work on this area, so check out her website and follow her on Facebook if you want to learn more about the details behind the Electoral College. You'll also want to check out nationalpopularvote.com so you can see what these folks are doing, and then you can talk to your local politicians about this because we have to make sure this doesn't happen. If we move to a national popular vote, it will fundamentally transform the way this country operates. Remember, we are a representative republic. But if we go to choosing our president on a popular vote, that's going to move us much closer to a democracy. And trust me, democracy does not work.